I've always been a sucker for adventure, which is probably what led me to the abandoned resort town of Whispering Pines. You know those places that seem like they're frozen in time, trapped in some sort of eerie, eternal dusk? Well, this was one of them, and I couldn't resist the pull of its mysterious allure. What started as a dare from my friends turned into a bone-chilling encounter that I'll never forget. The first time I heard about Whispering Pines, I was sitting in the corner booth of a dusty old diner. My buddies, Mark and Sarah, sat across from me, nursing their coffee cups. "Hey, have you ever heard of Whispering Pines?" Mark asked with a sly grin. "No, what's that?" I replied, genuinely intrigued. "It's this old, abandoned resort town about 2 hours from here," Sarah chimed in. "They say it's haunted, dude." "Haunted?" I chuckled. "You really think I'm buying into that ghost story nonsense?" Mark leaned in, his eyes shining with mischief. "How about this, buddy? We'll spend the night there, camp out or something, and if you're right, and it's all a load of hooey, we'll owe you big time." That sounded like a win-win situation to me. So, without much hesitation, we packed up some camping gear, snacks, and a few flashlights, and hit the road. The sun was setting as we approached the desolate resort town, and I couldn't help but notice how the town seemed to loom in the approaching darkness. It was as if the town had been frozen in time, with dilapidated buildings and overgrown trees reclaiming the land. Rusty swings creaked in the ghostly breeze, and I could hear the faint sound of children's laughter, though there was no one in sight. My heart raced as I realized that I was actually going to spend the night in this eerie place. We set up our campsite in the courtyard of the old resort, a place that had once been bustling with vacationers. A rusted sign still stood, welcoming guests to Whispering Pines Resort. The moon was our only source of light as we settled around the campfire, sharing stories and laughter to dispel the creeping unease. But as the night wore on, the laughter faded and an eerie silence engulfed us. The chilling breeze whispered through the pines, carrying voices I couldn't quite make out. I brushed it off as the wind playing tricks on my ears, but it was a feeble attempt to ignore the ominous feeling that had settled over me. Hours passed, and the tension grew thicker. Mark and Sarah had retreated to their tents, leaving me alone by the campfire. That's when I heard it, a faint, childlike giggle just beyond the flickering flames. I turned my flashlight toward the source, but the light barely penetrated the inky blackness. I strained my ears, listening to the inexplicable laughter growing closer. My pulse quickened, and I scanned the area with my flashlight, trying to locate the source of the eerie giggles. The beam of light landed on a swing swaying gently in the wind, and I nearly jumped out of my skin when I saw a shadowy figure sitting on it. A child, no older than 8, was swinging back and forth, his laughter echoing through the courtyard. But it wasn't an ordinary child. His features were blurred, as if he was shifting in and out of focus, and his laughter sent shivers down my spine. I called out to Mark and Sarah, my voice trembling, but there was no response. They were trapped in their own tents, oblivious to the surreal scene unfolding before me. With trembling hands, I continued to shine my light on the apparition, unable to tear my eyes away. As the child swung higher and higher, I could see the moonlight glinting off his pale, translucent skin. His laughter, which had been playful, began to take on a sinister tone. It was as if he was mocking me, taunting me with something I couldn't comprehend. Desperation pushed me to my feet, and I slowly approached the swing. The child's laughter turned into a spine-chilling wail, sending me stumbling back in fear. That's when the plot twist hit me like a freight train. The child's voice shifted, no longer belonging to a child, but to a grown man. "You should have left when you had the chance," he hissed. I turned and ran towards Mark and Sarah's tents, screaming for them to wake up, but it was too late. In the dim light, I could see their lifeless bodies, their faces contorted in terror. My heart pounded in my chest, and I stumbled backward, away from the gruesome scene. The shadowy figure on the swing had disappeared, leaving me alone in the darkness with the lifeless bodies of my friends. I was trapped in this nightmarish resort town, and the haunting whispers grew louder with each passing second. As I write this, I'm still here, alone in the darkness, waiting for the sun to rise. I've tried to escape, but it's as if the town won't let me leave. The memories of that night haunt me, and the voices of whispering pines still whisper in the night, telling me I should have left when I had the chance. So here I sit, waiting for dawn, hoping that somehow I'll make it out of this forsaken place, and that my story will serve as a warning to anyone who dares to visit the haunted town of Whispering Pines. If you ever hear about it, take my advice, stay far, far away, because the darkness that dwells here is unlike anything you can imagine. You know, I never used to be a believer in the supernatural or anything like that. I was your classic skeptic, laughing off ghost stories and creepy urban legends. But that all changed when I found myself trapped on the 13th floor of an old office building that was said to be cursed. It all started with a bet. My buddy Alex and I were out at a bar one night. A few drinks in, and the conversation took a spooky turn. Alex leaned in, grinning, and said, "You don't really believe in that 13th floor curse, do you?" I scoffed. "Nah, that's just superstitious nonsense. Ghosts and curses don't exist." Alex raised an eyebrow and took a sip of his beer. "Prove it. Spend a night on the 13th floor of the old Montgomery Building. It's been abandoned for years, and nobody has dared to go up there." I laughed, thinking it was all just a drunken dare, but as we shook on it, I couldn't help but feel a shiver run down my spine. The Montgomery Building was an imposing structure in the heart of downtown. It had been deserted for as long as I could remember, except for one peculiar detail. It had no 13th floor. Elevators wouldn't stop there, staircases never reached it, and the doors leading to it were sealed shut. To my surprise, Alex had the key to the mystery, an old rusted fire escape that led up to the forbidden 13th floor. He handed it to me that night, telling me I'd need it when I was ready to face the curse. The following Friday night, I found myself standing in front of the Montgomery Building, clutching that rusty fire escape key like it was a lifeline. The building loomed in the dark, windows shattered and jagged, an ominous silhouette against the moonless sky. I took a deep breath, told myself I was just proving a point, and pushed open the fire escape door. The climb to the 13th floor was not for the faint of heart. The steps creaked beneath my weight, and the metal was cold to the touch. My heart raced as I ascended, my mind a whirlwind of doubt and disbelief. Finally, I reached the 13th floor, but when I stepped onto it, something felt profoundly wrong. The air was heavy, charged with an unsettling energy. I couldn't see a thing in the darkness, so I flicked on my flashlight. The beam cut through the blackness, revealing a space that looked like it had been untouched for decades. Old cubicles, covered in layers of dust and cobwebs, were scattered around the floor. Papers and office supplies lay scattered, frozen in time. It was eerie, but it was nothing that I couldn't handle. I was ready to call Alex and gloat about how there was no curse after all. That's when I heard it, a faint, distant whisper. It was almost imperceptible, but it was there. I strained my ears, trying to make out the words, but the voice was just beyond comprehension. The whispers grew louder, as if a group of people were talking, but I couldn't decipher what they were saying. It was like they were taunting me, playing with my fear. My flashlight began to flicker, and I felt a rush of cold air. Panic surged through me, and I fumbled for my phone, hoping to call for help. But the signal was dead, and my flashlight went out, plunging me into total darkness. I was left with nothing but the eerie whispers closing in on me from all directions. My heart pounded in my chest as I fumbled for the fire escape key, desperate to escape this nightmare. I couldn't find it. Panic took hold of me, and I began to move blindly, crashing into furniture, tripping over debris. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and they seemed to come from right in front of me. Then, in the blackness, I felt something, a cold, clammy hand, reaching out and grasping my wrist. I screamed and tried to pull away, but the grip was unyielding. The whispers reached a fever pitch, and I could feel something pulling me closer, inexorably. And then the plot twist came. The lights flickered back on, and I found myself standing in the midst of a room that looked perfectly ordinary. The 13th floor was no longer abandoned. Cubicles were full of employees, working away like any office during the daytime. I pulled my wrist free from the icy grip and stumbled back, bewildered. The whispers were gone, and the normal hum of office activity filled the air. I couldn't believe my eyes. Was it all in my head? A hallucination? A stern-looking woman approached me, her eyes piercing. "Can I help you, sir?" I stammered, trying to find my words. I thought this floor was abandoned. There were whispers and darkness. She raised an eyebrow. Whispers, darkness. "Are you feeling all right, sir? This is just another floor of the Montgomery Building." My head was spinning. I was utterly perplexed. Had I imagined the whole thing? But the whispers, the icy grip on my wrist, they had felt so real. I was at a loss for words, and the woman seemed to think I was a lunatic. The rest of my time on the 13th floor was surreal. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had happened, something unexplainable. I didn't hear the whispers again, and I certainly didn't feel any icy grips. It was as if the curse, if there ever was one, had passed me by. As I left the Montgomery Building, my thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion. Had I just experienced a ghostly encounter, or had I lost my mind for a moment? I still can't be sure, but one thing's for certain: I'll never look at an empty floor of an office building the same way again, and I won't be taking any more bets on the supernatural. I've always considered myself a rational person, the kind who scoffs at the mere thought of ghosts and haunted places. But that was before I found myself alone in a children's playground on a moonless night, surrounded by the eerie laughter of phantom children. Let me tell you about the evening I'll never forget. It all started when my curiosity got the best of me. I was out for a late night walk, taking a shortcut through the neighborhood's local playground. The place was usually alive with the sounds of kids running around, laughter echoing off the swing sets, and the joyful squeaks of the seesaws. But on that particular night, it was different. As I walked through the gates, an unnatural stillness hung in the air. The playground structures, once vibrant with color and life, stood in eerie silhouette against the dim glow of distant streetlights. It was like the life had been sucked out of the place, leaving behind a creeping sense of foreboding. I couldn't help but feel a shiver crawl down my spine. I told myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but something about the place felt profoundly wrong. A part of me wanted to turn around and head back, but my curiosity held me in its grip. I pressed on. The night was darker than I'd ever seen, the playground illuminated only by the faint, ghostly glow of the stars. As I ventured further in, the silence was broken by a distant giggle, unmistakably a child's laughter. It sent a chill down my spine. I scanned the area, but there was no one in sight. The source of the laughter was impossible to pinpoint. Just as I was about to dismiss it as some auditory illusion, it echoed closer, more vivid, as if a group of children were playing just beyond the shadows. My heart raced, and I called out, my voice wavering, "Is anyone there?" Silence followed, but then the laughter erupted again, echoing from the nearby swings. My flashlight pierced the darkness, revealing a swing set, and to my astonishment, the swings were moving on their own, creaking back and forth as if occupied by invisible riders. My skepticism was being replaced by unease. Maybe it was a group of kids playing a prank on me. My flashlight continued to scan the playground, and my heart sank as I saw them, the phantom children. A group of translucent figures, each one resembling a child, was playing on the swings. They were dressed in old-fashioned clothing, their features indistinct. Their laughter was both enchanting and eerie, filling the night with an unsettling melody. My initial thought was that they were just kids who couldn't sleep, but the more I looked at them, the more I realized something was off. Their movements were strange, almost mechanical, and their faces were a blur of shifting shapes, like a distorted image in a funhouse mirror. As I watched in both awe and terror, I noticed they were beckoning me, their ghostly arms outstretched, fingers motioning for me to join them. My heart pounded as I considered the impossibility of it all. Ghost children playing in the middle of the night. But as their calls grew more insistent, something in me urged me to step closer, to cross that threshold between the living and whatever they were. It was as if their phantom laughter had hypnotized me, and I couldn't resist their beckoning. My mind was racing, and my feet carried me closer to the swings. It was as if I was in a trance, moving through the chilling night air. When I finally reached the swings, their ethereal forms swirled around me, their laughter becoming a cacophony in my ears. And then came the plot twist. Just as I was about to reach out to touch one of the phantom children, my flashlight flickered, and the night fell into complete darkness. The laughter ceased abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence. Panic gripped me as I fumbled with the flashlight, trying to get it to work. When the beam of light finally returned, I was standing alone in the deserted playground. The swings were still, and the children were gone. It was as if they had never existed, evaporated into thin air. I stood there, bewildered and disoriented. Was it all a hallucination? A figment of my imagination brought on by the eerie atmosphere of the abandoned playground? I couldn't be sure, but one thing was clear. I was alone in the dark, and I couldn't get out of there fast enough. As I walked away from the playground, I couldn't shake the feeling of having crossed some unseen boundary, a line between the living and the realm of the supernatural. I still don't know what I experienced that night, but I do know that I'll never look at a children's playground the same way again. And I'll always remember the chilling laughter of those phantom children, a memory that still haunts my dreams.